This is a critical question about your national security, about your privacy, and the balance between the two. At the beginning of this program, we heard a lot from the head of the agencies. We took their entire opening statements and we're clipping their responses. So we're getting this side of the security agencies. We want to get other perspectives. We've had Anne Cavoukian on, Ontario's Privacy Commissioner. Christopher Parsons, a postdoctoral fellow at the Citizen Lab from the Munk School of Global Affairs, is here now. And this lab has done a lot of work talking about security and the line between intelligence. What do you make of what Michelle Colomb, John Forrester, and the National Security Advisor, Stephen Rigby, have said when they said collection of metadata is legal and it does not harm Canadians' privacy?
Well, to the first, Canadians and scholars and researchers in this area were all very interested and surprised to hear that CSIC believes that it is entirely legal to be engaging in the collection of metadata in Canada. The reason for that is we always, every time, every jurisdiction, we hear that metadata isn't an issue. It's not the communication, it's just data about the communication, so don't worry. Well, one piece of data about the communication, using the photo example, last time you took a photo on your smartphone, it probably had GPS information, where the photo was taken, when it was taken. That becomes very sensitive information. If you take a lot of photos, you can track someone over a period of time. So this isn't an incidental one piece of data, in which case metadata might be somewhat trivial. But these aren't agencies that take one piece of data and then they call it rest for the day. They are always carnivorously absorbing information. And so when they say it's just metadata, that's because they are incapable of analyzing all that content in real time or near real time. And really, if metadata wasn't important, if it wasn't key to their operations, they wouldn't be collecting it in the volume that they are. So the notion that this is somehow not privacy invasive, almost every major national security investigation begins with metadata and then it gets to the content.
What about this notion that the Snowden revelations that our own Greg Weston brought us, that in fact CSEC was using this quote-unquote game-changing technology, possibly tapping into airport Wi-Fi systems to collect metadata, that it was just quote-unquote a model. In other words, they needed to test run it to make sure it would work in the event that a very legitimate security threat happened. In the same way as a source inside the intelligence agency told me, look, the military tests out its equipment. They have a place where they drop bombs to test how effective a bomb is. In our world, we have to do it live like this. Do you buy that notion?
Well, I understand it, but when you're dropping a bomb, you don't drop it in the middle of Toronto to see if the bomb works. This is a situation where they targeted Canadians. I mean, they can say it wasn't targeted because it wasn't looking at Chris Parsons or you, Evan, but this was an incident where they were massively collecting data in a way that no one understood they could do, and they don't seem to have any legal issues, or they don't believe there are legal issues with it. So do I believe that they did it? Sure. Does that mean the model is appropriate? No, absolutely not. They could have spent a lot more time, a lot more money. It would have been much more difficult to populate a database with phony information. Commissioner Cavoukian has written about privacy by design and privacy protective surveillance. They could have tried to implement even those sorts of procedures, and it's not clear that they did. They ran this live, it touched Canadians. We had a national defense organization monitoring Canadians. Whether they did something with it or not is irrelevant. They did it, and whether it's legal or not, it wasn't right.
All right, and in terms of the oversight, when they say, the commissioner says, we've done everything right in terms of CSEC, the Security Intelligence Review Committee that oversees CSIS, they say, we have oversight, it's all good. The National Security Advisor, Stephen Rigby, says, I think it's a very effective form of oversight, despite the fact that the threat environment has increased. In your view, is there enough oversight?
No, there quite frankly isn't. You can cast your eye around any of the other Five Eyes nations, and you can point to deficits, and I've professionally done this at points. But they are still better than the Canadian situation. We can turn to the US with the entirely secretive FISA courts that have been authorizing mass surveillance. That is more of a check and oversight than what we've really enjoyed in Canada. In Canada, we need to know how many interceptions are going on a regular basis. We don't have that information, even for domestic collection of information, which CSIS is involved in, of course. in terms of foreign directives, we don't know what they're allowed to do or not. And what's really important, I don't think many Canadians appreciate this, is there was an access to information request for how metadata, when it's collected by Canadians, how is it protected? How are Canadians' privacy protected by CSIC?
Before I let
that
you
came
go,
back empty.
Recently, you, along with a group of scholars and civil liberties groups, sent letters to telecom providers, Bell, TELUS, Rogers, asking them to explain, quote, why, how often and under what conditions they provide information to government authorities. Where do those requests stand today, and what do you expect these companies to reveal in terms of, if at all, they cooperate with organizations like CSEC or CSIS?
Well, I'm very hopeful. I mean, Canadian telecommunications companies routinely identify themselves as being highly concerned with Canadians' privacy. Our letters, they're not legally binding. They are just that. They're requests. But Canadians have a right to know, and they really do need to know. And whether that's the government tells them how often they're conducting surveillance, or their telecommunications companies in Canada follow a growing model of what are called transparency reports and just say, this is how we comply with government, under what terms, and this is the kind of information we provide. We don't think ISPs are doing something wrong, but I think Canadians and consumers and ISPs want to actually have a better frame and a better story for what's going on.
All right, Christopher Parsons from the Citizen Lab of the Munk School of Global Affairs. I appreciate your perspective as we watch extraordinary testimony from the heads of some of the most powerful security and intelligence people in Canada, the head of CSIS, the head of CSEC, and Canada's National Security Advisor, Stephen Rigby. I appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.